Well, good morning. I don't know how many of you expected to see Mitch up here today. There are a few of you? Okay. Well, he is gone. Katie's grandmother had passed away, and so they are in Tennessee. I think are they going to be traveling back today? They'll be traveling back today. So I am filling in for him. He has been going over a series covering the Apostles' Creed, and I will not be doing that for him today. He will pick that up next week since he had been working on those lessons. And so we're going to do something that's just a little bit different today. Let me announce one thing, and I don't think it was announced earlier, but tonight we have what's called Height 5. Is that what it's called? Okay, so if you're a parent of a younger child and you would like to be able to go to your small group and not have your kids with you, or if you want to go out and eat or spend some time with some other couples, at 4:30 today, you are welcome to come and bring your kids here to Western Heights, and we're going to be helping you we'll be taking care of them for you, actually. And so, not helping you, but we'll be taking care of them. And so come. Yeah, I know it wouldn't be of any benefit if we were helping you take care of them necessarily. So come and bring your kids. They'll have good care, and come back at 7 o'clock. Because while we love your children, we know you love them more, right? So, all right. So that's for you tonight. I have some questions I want to ask you. How many of you have brothers or sisters? Okay, a lot of people. All right. How many of you have ever been angry with one of your brothers or sisters? All right. How many of you have ever got into a heated argument with your brother or sister? My goodness. We got some dysfunctional families here. What is it? So, how many of you have ever got into a knockdown, drag-out fight with your brother or sister? What is wrong with you people? Aren't you supposed to love your families? Oh, man, don't you know that that's how it is in families sometimes? You get angry with your siblings. That happened with me and my sister. So I have a sister who's younger than me. We would get angry with each other. We'd fight. We'd argue. We would beat each other up, stuff like that. Now, I just want you to know that I got the raw end of the deal because she's young, she's a little bit younger than me, but she's like 4 or 5 inches taller than me, and I don't know how that happened. But we would get angry with each other, and we knew how to push each other's buttons. I knew that if I could get her upset when mom and dad were close by, I could get her in trouble. And then she didn't know when to stop talking. So she would get in trouble. What she would do for me is she would try to get me upset, and she had a little tape recorder, and she would hide it in places and catch me saying things and play it for mom and dad. So that's what we would do. Anger is sometimes just a part of our nature. And yet, as you think about that idea of anger, doesn't it seem like it's becoming more prevalent in society? Doesn't it feel like it's getting a little bit worse? I mean, when you watch the news, what do you hear about? You hear about wars, you hear about riots, you hear about people who are angry about this topic or this other topic, you hear about mass shootings. You hear about domestic violence and road rage. A few years ago, I knew someone who was driving down the highway, and they were cut off by somebody, and something just clicked inside of them, and they got so extremely upset about it, they started chasing the person that cut them off in traffic. Until a highway patrolman saw them chasing this person and driving recklessly. And when the lights went on the highway patrolman's car, suddenly it clicked for him, and it was like, what am I doing? Sometimes we lose control of our anger. We just let it go. And when that happens, there are consequences. It may be consequences that deal with retaliation. It may have to do with physical harm that occurs. It may have to do with emotional trauma that occurs as a result of it. It may have to do with damaged relationships. But when we let our anger get the best of us and take control, it creates some major issues for us. Now, the thing is that anger isn't a new thing. It's been around for a long time, right? So in Genesis chapter 4, it says, Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to her son Cain. And she said, with the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man. Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. And in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. But Abel brought the fat portions of some of the firstborn of his flock. And the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. And so Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. And then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is to have you, but you must master it. And if we read on in the story, what we discover is that Cain doesn't listen to God. He takes his brother out into the field and he kills his brother. And rather than trying to be more obedient to God and gain his approval in that way, he decides to get rid of the competition. And there's consequences. Obviously, the consequence that Abel has lost his life, but now his parents have lost a child. And then we discover that Cain is cast out of the presence of God. And as Cain talks about this, it's almost too much for him to bear. But this anger, this kind of stuff was happening even during the time of Jesus. So Jesus would often go to synagogues, and he would preach, and sometimes he would heal people on the Sabbath. And he happened to be in a synagogue on the Sabbath, and the teachers of the law and the Pharisees were watching. They wanted to catch him breaking the law as they would see it, because they saw Jesus basically as an enemy. It says he, talking about Jesus, looked around at them, and then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. Talking to the man with a withered hand. He said, stretch out your hand. And he did so, and his hand was completely restored. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were furious and began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus. What they were discussing is, how can we get rid of him? And eventually what they did was they killed him. They were the ones who set things up for him to be crucified. Religious leaders. People that are supposed to help people to know who God is and how they should function as a follower of God. And they are the ones who kill the Son of God. Now, what about us? We're religious people, right? I mean, we come here and we praise God. We encourage one another. We pray for each other. We have smiling faces and we greet one another and we want to show love. But what do we do the rest of the week? What do we do when we go to the store and somebody doesn't make us happy, or we don't get the order that we want, or someone is not treated us the way that we want? How do we respond? Do we respond in anger? When we're on the road and somebody cuts us off, do we lose our temper? We're in a political season, right? We're always in a political season now. But if we listen to the candidates and we listen to people who speak for them, what do we hear? Words that disparage others. And sometimes in our posts on social media and the people that we listen to, what we hear are words that demoralize, that demonize, that seek to destroy people and seek to destroy their character. And sometimes we get caught up in that we say some of the same things. And yet on Sunday, what we do is we come and worship God. And later in the week, because we see somebody that we feel opposes a view that we have, we speak about them in a way that sometimes doesn't even consider that they're human. James said in James 3, he says, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Because you know what? It's easy when we look at someone, and what we see when we look at their face is the opposing idea that we don't agree with. Or maybe the candidate that they choose to follow. And we see them as an enemy. Well, what James is telling us is we need to see each other even if they're people who have different ideas or may look different from us, we need to see them as being created in the likeness of God. And when we do that, that changes our perspective. I'm not saying that you have to agree with people that you don't agree with. I'm not saying that you can't choose to follow a certain direction or vote a particular candidate or any of those things. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go out and eat or go to retail places. What I'm saying is that when we deal with people, when we deal with other people, we need to remember that they have been created in the image of God just like us. And that should have an impact on how we treat them and how we speak to them and how we speak about them. Because if we don't do that, it makes it easier if we just see them as an argument or the view or the opposing view. It's easier to judge them. It's easier to attack them. Paul says this in Colossians chapter 3. He says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. And if any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, just as members of one body you were called to peace. God has called us to peace. And what he tells us to do is to put on these characteristics of compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. That we need to be forgiving just like God has forgiven us. That we need to love others just like God has loved us. And that when we are doing those things, when we have those, displaying those characteristics, what we are doing is we are promoting peace. Because we have been called to be peacemakers. So how do we do this? I mean, what are some of the practical things that we can do to help control our anger and to deal with things in a proper way? Well, let's go to Calvin and Hobbes. Now, some of you are familiar with this comic. It's an old comic. I'm going to read up here because I can't read it back there. So Calvin's the little guy. If you don't know Calvin and Hobbes, Hobbes is the tiger. I guess is it like his imaginary friend or pet, something like that. Okay, so Calvin is saying when a person pauses in mid-sentence to choose a word, that's the best time to jump in and change the subject. It's like the interception in football. You grab the other guy's idea, you run the opposite way with it, and the more sentences you complete, the higher your score. The idea is to block the other guy's thoughts and express your own. That's how you win. And Hobbes says, conversations aren't contests. And Calvin, okay, a point for you, but I'm still ahead. Don't we treat conversations like contests, especially if the person we're talking to may have a different view from us? Have you been in a situation where you're talking with somebody who may not agree with you about something, and what you discover is it suddenly becomes an argument? And then maybe you start speaking over the other person? It's because it's turned into a contest for us, rather than an attempt to truly understand what the other person is saying. So if we want to be able to control our anger and we want to be people who create peace, one of the first things we need to do is learn how to listen. In James 1, my dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. So we need to be quick to listen. Have you ever had a conversation with your husband or wife, or maybe with someone else, and the conversation kind of goes poorly, and you're arguing about whatever the topic is, and about 10 or 15 minutes into it, you suddenly realize that you're both saying the same thing, but you're saying it with different words? Has that ever happened to you? A few people are shaking their heads. It happens with Cheryl and me. I did. Okay, no, I might get in trouble because I didn't ask Cheryl if I could share this story. But, so we do that. And we'll just look at each other like, we should know better than this, right? But we will get frustrated with each other. And then all of a sudden we realize that, you know what, we really agree on this, but we didn't realize it. It's because we're not listening very well. But listening can also promote peace. When I was youth minister, I was directing Camp Ichthus. It's a camp that our kids go to. And we had a great week of camp. And on the last night of camp, we played this wonderful game called the Great Mattress Run. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details, but basically a cabin would go out with their mattress. They were supposed to find all these clues all over camp. It's like kind of like a scavenger hunt. And whoever got all the clues first, got back to base, they're the winners. But what would happen is that you could get caught by someone, and if one of the staff members saw you and caught you, then you'd have to jump up and down and count to 100 in unison before you could move on. We made some mistakes with this game. The area was entirely too big for them to cover. The clues were too difficult for them to find. And it was like over 100 degrees. So now this was near the end of the day. And basically what happened is the game became utter chaos. Kids got frustrated with each other. Some kids at the front of the mattress took off while the other ones in the back didn't take off fast enough, and so kids were falling. Some twisted their ankles. We had a few kids that had asthma attacks. It was just, and then they were cheating and arguing with each other, and they were arguing within their cabin, and within 30 minutes, it was like, we need to stop this game. This is not good, because we have been spending all week long teaching them how to get along and how to follow God and all these things, and we just destroyed it with one stupid game. So we called them into the courtyard and finally took care of the ones who were injured and those types of things. We had them sit down, got them something to drink, and they're just hot. And we're supposed to go from this into what we call a circle devo, which is a very spiritual time. And their minds were not in that right frame. And so the only thing I could think to do was, all right, I know we messed up. Talk to me about it. And so what we did was we let them gripe at us and to us for a while and just listen. And they did. They let us have it. And we apologized, and we said, oh, yeah, we didn't think about that. That was a stupid thing on our part, da-da-da-da. And what was interesting is that as the conversation went on and we listened, they began to start changing their tone and actually started looking at themselves. Now, this was not a planned out thing. It's just what happened. And so they blamed us and then began to say, you know what, we could have handled it a little bit better than we did. We shouldn't have cheated in this situation, or we shouldn't have treated this person this way, or we shouldn't have got so mad, or And so what happened is just by listening, it was able to create some peace in a situation was utter chaos. So when things seem to be getting out of control, listen. It's really, really important for us to do. But also we have to be careful about who influences us, because the people that we hang around with and the people that we listen to will influence us to be like them. In Proverbs 22, do not make friends with a hot-tempered man. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn his ways and get yourself ensnared. We have to be careful about who we listen to. Bob Goff, in his book called Love Does, tells a story. Back in the 70s, he was hitchhiking. He said, back then, we didn't know that. We knew it was dangerous. He had some, he would take precautions. So one of his rules was that he would walk up to a car that stopped, and he would look in the window and say, where are you headed? And it gave him a minute to kind of scan the car to make sure it looks like it's safe. And also to find out if the person's going in the same direction. And if it didn't look safe, he could say, well, no, I'm not going there. Thanks. Well, he was going from San Diego to San Francisco, got a certain distance, and then got stuck and waited a whole day for somebody to pull over, and nobody was pulling over. And so this van pulls up, has no windows on the side except up by the driver and passenger window and in the front. And he is so ready to get going, he just jumps in the van, doesn't ask a question. The guy takes off. So he's in the van, and he begins to notice that it really smells bad. The guy does not have good hygiene. So he's thinking, okay, well, it stinks that it's like that. Windows are all rolled up, but then he noticed that there's these rose petals on the dashboard, and he doesn't see flowers in the van. He's not a florist. he looks at the guy. The guy's got a big old bushy beard. Looks kind of rough. He's not a real big guy, but he looks a little rough. And then he sees over on the left side of the dashboard this framed picture of some man's feet with rose petals all around it. And he's like, I think I got in the wrong van. And so he tries to strike up a conversation. He says, so where are you headed? And the guy doesn't answer him. So he waits a little bit longer. He said, well, where did you come from? Doesn't answer him. You know, it's a beautiful day today, isn't it? I just love this weather in California. Guy's not talking to him. So he's not sure exactly what to do. And eventually the man turns and looks at him. He says, do you really want to know who I am? And he says, sure. And the man says, I'm Satan. At that point, he's ready to jump out of the van, right? So he says, well, can you pull over up here and let me out? And the guy just keeps driving, and he doesn't say a word. And he's starting to get scared, and he is beginning to get a little angry. And so he threatens this man with bodily harm if he doesn't stop the van right now and let him out. Satan lets him out. And he gains his composure. But if you've read any of Bob's stuff, and the book is about love does, right? He really focuses on that idea of love. He was beginning to lose it with this man who threatened him. He felt threatened by. He still has to get to San Francisco. So he starts hitchhiking again. A station wagon pulls up. There's a lady inside. He says, where are you heading? I'm going to San Francisco. All right. Well, he sees that there's this big black box in the back of the station wagon. But he feels kind of safe, so he gets in. And he begins to talk to her, finds out she's going to San Francisco. She's going to a wedding. And he says, well, what is that big black box in the back of your car? Because he's hoping it's not a dead body or something. She said, it's my harp. I'm supposed to play the music at the wedding. So suddenly he's out of Satan's car and he's in a car with an angel, kind of, right? He relaxes, things are better. And this is the statement he makes, the lesson that he says he learned from this. He says, you become like the people you hang around, and to a great degree, you end up going wherever they're headed. And so we need to be careful about who we hitch our wagon to, right? Who it is that we really listen to all the time, who we allow to influence us, because if we're not careful, we may become just like them. We also need wisdom. We need to seek wisdom. If we're going to control our anger and bring peace, we need to seek wisdom. Mockers stir up a city, but wise men turn away anger. And then a few verses later, a fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control. Now, it's easy to say you need to be wise. It's harder to get there, right? But in James chapter 1, what James tells us is to pray for wisdom and trust that God will give us wisdom. And so my encouragement is that we pray for wisdom, that God will give us the wisdom to deal with the anger that we may feel inside of us, or to deal with the situations may promote anger within us. And deal with the situations that may not be peaceful at all, where we can bring peace. But we also, I would encourage us to pray for the other person. The person that we may be upset with. Because when you pray for the other person, you begin to see them and remind yourself of the fact that they have been created in God's image. And it's harder to stay angry with someone that you're actually praying for. Now, you're not praying. What I'm not suggesting is pray that God will take care of them and straighten them out, all that stuff. It may be that you want God to direct them. But if you were in their place, how would you want to be treated? How would you want to be prayed for? What would you need? What is in their best interest? And so, pray those things. This is going back to chapter 3 that we were in just not too long ago. But what it says here at the end of that passage, and over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them together in perfect unity. The two greatest commands are love God and love others. And so if we truly want to be peacemakers, if we truly want to have control over the anger that may swell up in us at times, we need to remind ourselves that God loved us first, and as a result, we should love others. And also, we need to remind ourselves of who Jesus is. Colossians 1:19-20 says, "For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him," dwell in Jesus, "and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through the blood that's shed on the cross." You see what Jesus did, the ultimate peacemaker? He came into our world and lived among us to show us how we can treat others. But he also paid the ultimate price and was willing to sacrifice himself so that there could be peace between us and God. And as God's children, we should be following that example. We should realize what Jesus has done for us. When we're baptized into Christ, one of the things that we are displaying there and reminding ourselves of is that we are being buried with him in the likeness of his death, so that when we rise, we'll rise in newness of life. We'll live a life that's sacrificial in nature, just like he was sacrificial for us. And what did he do? He made a difference in the world. And so we are called to make a difference by being peacemakers ourselves. In fact, Jesus says in Matthew 5, near the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." If the Son of God was a peacemaker, then shouldn't his children also be peacemakers as well? Sometimes we're going to lose our temper. Sometimes we're going to get frustrated. Sometimes we're going to have difficulty in chaotic situations. But in all those situations, we've been called to peace. God has called us to peace. And if we are truly following the example of Jesus, then we will be peacemakers who lead others to peace in a chaotic world as well. So I don't know where you're at, if you struggle with anger, if you've lost your temper recently, if you don't feel any peace in your life, if you allow others to influence you in ways you shouldn't. But if you are needing strength and encouragement, and you want people to pray with you and encourage you and to help you to be more of what God wants you to be, or maybe you're ready to take that step and make that change in your life and be baptized into Christ. Whatever that might be for you, we ask you to let us know. Let's stand and sing together.